Hello, everyone. I'm Santier, and welcome to a very rare episode of my Thinking About Game Design series that I started quite a while back and then haven't done anything with in a while. This is just going to be a podcast today, but I wanted to talk about the difference and just do some comparison and contrast with the ritual stones from Ashen and the bonfires from Dark Souls 1 through 3. Because there's some interesting stuff that I realized as I was playing through Ashen and just kind of my own reactions to it. There will probably be... I'm going to be focusing on mechanics, but there might be some spoilers connected to this, so just a little bit of a heads up. I'm not really going to focus on narrative stuff per se, but some of the mechanical realities of things will potentially result in some spoilers. The other thing that I want to just mention before I really get going here is that I'm going to try my best to separate things that are fact from my opinions about them. This is something that we don't really have a habit linguistically of doing, at least this is my experience. We call something good or bad, when what we really mean is, I dislike that, I like that, I have a preference for this way of doing things, whatever the opposite of a preference is. This idea. So I'm going to try... There's going to be a lot of facts I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the consequences of those facts, which are also facts, and then my opinions on those consequences. And that's going to be one of those things where I'm going to try to separate those, because the thing is, you may have a very different set of opinions on these consequences and these facts than I have. And that's cool. That's great. It's not going to influence how I do my game design, but it might a little bit. But in terms of looking at this stuff, I'm going to look at, okay, if I'm doing a game where I'm using this sort of setup, we'll get into what I mean mechanically here in a moment, but this sort of setup, this is stuff that's going to influence how I'm going to think about approaching that design, and I hope it'll be an interesting discussion for you. So, let's just start by establishing what it is that I'm talking about, just more broadly, for those maybe are a little unfamiliar, a little rusty, or whatever. So Ashen is a game that's kind of like the Dark Souls games in many respects. And so let's just start with the Dark Souls games, just to kind of establish the bonfire. The bonfire is kind of become an icon of Dark Souls, I think, but it's the checkpoint system. You walk up to a bonfire, you light it, you sit at it. When you sit at it, it saves it as the location that you last rested at. I don't remember exactly how 2 and 3 handle it. If it's just lighting it sets it as your checkpoint, I think that's the case. But regardless, I usually think of sitting at the bonfire, sitting at your checkpoint, and that's certainly the case for Dark Souls 1. Now, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 and 3 handle things a little bit differently. Dark Souls 2 and 3 are much more like Demon Souls, the spiritual predecessor, I guess, to the Dark Souls franchise, where what they have... Okay, I need to back up. Dark Souls, you make your character stronger by upgrading your weapons and upgrading your character by getting levels. These are the predominant ways in which you get stronger. You also can get access to more powerful spells and things like that. But the primary ways you get stronger, getting more levels and getting upgraded equipment. In Demon Souls, which did the same sort of thing, had the same sort of mechanical structure in terms of character advancement, did this in a hub area called the Nexus. And these games all use souls as the kind of the universal currency. You can buy weapon upgrades with them, as well as with upgrade materials. You buy levels with them. You buy consumable items with them. So sitting at a bonfire in Dark Souls makes a checkpoint, but in order to be able to level up or spend your souls, really, in Dark Souls 1, you can do that at the bonfire. In Dark Souls 2 and 3, I feel like I presented this in terrible order, but hopefully everybody's following okay. In Dark Souls 2 and 3, you do it at a hub area. There's an NPC you talk to level up, like what you do in Demon Souls. It's clearly From Software has kind of preferred this style of hub style. But, so you level up at the central hub area, Majula for Dark Souls 2 and Firelink Shrine for Dark Souls 3. I'm just going to call it the hub. You upgrade your weapons there. You can buy consumables there. In Dark Souls 1, you buy levels from the bonfire directly, and you can get fairly early on some stuff that allows you to be able to reinforce weapons and armor at the bonfire. The upgrade system is different between them. I'm not going to focus too much on that, but the basic point is that you can spend your souls, especially on levels. This is really important. We'll get to why in a moment. Now, Ashen works pretty differently In terms of the way you get stronger, you primarily get stronger by turning in quests. That gives you more maximum health and more maximum stamina. They use Ashen and the Souls games all use stamina based. I assume you've probably played these if you're watching this, but for those who maybe are a little unfamiliar with one or the other. Now, Ashen has the concept of a ritual stone, which serves as a checkpoint. One of the other things that Bonfires do is they fully restore your Estus, which is a healing item that has a limited number of uses, but you can fully recharge it by resting at a bonfire. Ashen has an equivalent called the Crimson Gourd, which also gets fully restored when you go to a ritual stone. Now, Ashen does have consumables that you can buy. The most reliable place of doing that is in the hub, because Ashen also uses a hub, like Dark Souls 2 and 3 use. This is where I finally built up enough that I can begin talking about these similarities. Now, one of the things that... the other thing with Ashen, I should just finish this thought, is one of the primary way you get stronger in that game is just through weapon upgrades, and you do that at the hub as well. And then there's also an area where you can kind of set a loadout, which you also do at the hub. One of the big differences between Ashen and the Dark Souls games, small differences, is Ashen has a storage box in your hub that you can only access there as far as I've been able to tell, whereas in the Dark Souls games, you get to access that at the bonfire regardless of which game you're talking about, although the first one at the very least requires you to buy that upgrade from an NPC merchant. So... hopefully we've kind of gotten that establishment of like that. So Ashen's ritual stones are just a checkpoint. If you die, you respawn there, and going into that area, the area around it refills your Crimson Gourd and fully restores your HP. And that sort of functionality is at ritual stones. It has another sort of like half checkpoint that just restores your health and Crimson Gourd charges. These are... They don't serve as checkpoints. So if you die, you do not go back to them. So that's a very critical difference. So this is where we get to the next sort of related topic, which is fast travel. Dark Souls 1 has... Like, all of these games have fast travel. Fast travel from their checkpoint things to other of their checkpoint things. But that's a little... There's some differences. Dark Souls 1, you do not get the ability to fast travel right away, and the bonfires you can fast travel from any bonfire, but there's a limited selection of bonfires you can fast travel to once you unlock the ability to fast travel. Dark Souls 2 and 3 allow you to fast travel right from the beginning to any bonfire you have touched/rested at. Again, it's been a little bit, don't remember exactly the requirements, but basically any bonfire you've been to, you can then fast travel to. Ashen has some of the places you can fast travel to and from, and you do it. It's a little bit into the game before you unlock the ability to fast travel. So it's got a couple of things going on here. So let's talk about some of the first consequences of this that really came up. First of all, everything in terms of like doing your upgrades and stuff in Ashen, your ability to spend Scoria, which is your universal currency in that game, is centered at the hub area. There again, you can sometimes find wandering merchants that will sell you some consumables, but in terms of like big purchases, things that will like upgrade, because in Ashen your main upgrades are to your Crimson Gourd. You can buy increased charges and increased potency, and then upgrading your weapon. So weapon upgrades are pretty important in that game as well as like some other pieces of equipment that you can potentially purchase if you want to. So your ability to really spend your Scoria is centered in your hub area. This means as you're adventuring out in that game, the further away you are from the hub, the harder it is to get back until you unlocked fast travel. This creates a play pattern where in Dark Souls 1, any bonfire you come to is a place to spend your hard-earned souls. in Dark Souls 2 and 3, any bonfire you get to allows you to go back to the place to spend your hard-earned souls. In Ashen, any ritual stone you go to, until you get fast travel, is not a way to spend any of your scoria. You have to manually hoof it back, walk all the way back to the area to spend your hard-earned scoria. It's not too bad in the beginning of the game, and you get fast travel relatively early, but even still, like, it takes a little bit to get to that point. I think it's like the second major boss. And so it takes a little bit to get to that point. There is a period of time there where you're starting to get far enough away that it's kind of a big trek to get back. And so trying to preserve your scoria becomes a lot more tense, a lot more challenging in that regard. Now, I personally found this to not be something I quite liked. I was like, oh, I found a new checkpoint, but that doesn't really feel like it's allowed me to be able to spend my resources to get stronger. I don't quite like how this feels. Now, once you do unlock fast travel, not every ritual stone can be fast traveled to and from. Most of them can, but not every single one of them. For the most part, this is something that didn't cause me too much issue, but just a note, we'll get to the thing that really inspired this in a moment. So but what we've seen over here is, I remember when Dark Souls 2 came out, people were like, oh, I don't like this fast traveling all the time. I liked having to explore the world and all that sort of thing. If they did not have fast traveling from every bonfire, allowing you to fast travel to Majula and then back to that bonfire, back to the hub and then back to the bonfire, it would create a sort of play pattern that would be a lot more tense, a lot more difficult, because you are not able to just spend your souls, your currency, at the bonfire. And that's a huge difference. And something that I did not appreciate until I played Ashen, which put me in that exact position. And so I think in retrospect, I've learned something about that, and I actually kind of prefer, like, I realize the value of having that instant fast travel, but more importantly, the value of, if you're going to, because in any of these games, when you die, you drop your currency and you have to go pick it back up where you died. In Ashen, you have to go pick up your scoria. In the Souls games, you have to go pick up your souls. So, like, the ability to hang on to, I should have included that earlier, but this is what you get for an off-the-cuff video. So your ability to be able to go back and recover your resources and hang on to it, like, it feels really good to be at a spot where you're just like, okay, finally I can spend my resources. I've reached a checkpoint. I can spend my resources, and now I have permanently upgraded my character. I've permanently been able to invest them. It really is a big relief when you find a checkpoint and you're able to do that. And you would not have gotten that in Dark Souls 2 or 3 if you did not have the fast travel back to the hub. And then you would feel like you've lost a lot of progress if you couldn't then fast travel immediately back to the bonfire you just fast traveled from to get back to the hub. And Ashen really showed that to me, and it made me appreciate that element of the Dark Souls 2, why they have the fast travel right from the start, from every bonfire to every bonfire. It's facilitating a lot more than some of the world design that maybe people aren't as fond of. It's facilitating that hub-based playstyle of having all the surfaces at the hub. So that brings us to the next thing that Ashen does. Ashen has dungeons, which is not really a concept Dark Souls has. There's thematic dungeons. Like, it's hard to argue that there aren't places that feel like dungeons in, say, Dark Souls 3, for example. But in terms of, like, thematically, the Souls games don't really have, like, a traditional, like, Zelda dungeon or wherever, where it's like, oh, this is a one-shot area that you're going way deep down sort of thing. Just to kind of explain a little bit more, Ashen has these areas. You go into them, and you have to make your way all the way through it to get to the boss and defeat the boss. There's no fast travel from it. There's also something else that I realized as I was thinking about this. Not really any shortcuts. So this is something else that Dark Souls 1 in particular was especially good at, but all of the From Software games have to some extent, which are shortcuts that are basically, the classic example is the elevator that's not there yet and the door that doesn't open from this side. And people will make jokes about those, but they serve a really important purpose of you've gotten somewhere, now they allow you to get back to the checkpoint. And the other thing that they do that's really important is once you've gotten that shortcut unlocked, if you die, they let you skip through a bunch of the level. Ashen's dungeons, from what I saw, didn't really have shortcuts. You just had to get through them, and they often were very lacking in checkpoints, maybe having one right before the boss. So, and that was one that you can't fast travel from. So it's very easy to like make it through this dungeon, have gained a lot of scoria, and then die and lose it. This is a play pattern I personally did not like, and it made me really appreciate the ability to fast travel, to be able to spend my souls, to have shortcuts, to be able to allow me to get through an area that I'm like... Because my frustration with Ashen was I've gotten this far through the dungeon, but it's requiring me to like... It's not providing me any sense of obtained progress. I just go back to the entrance every time I die, and having to go back to the entrance every single time was something that I personally found very frustrating, because I didn't feel like I was able to really get anywhere. It didn't matter how long I played at it until that moment that you finally get it done. Now, this is where there's going to be a difference of opinion, right? Some people are really going to like that additional tension, that additional feeling that they have to really push it through and make it all the way through. For me personally, I want to be able to feel like I'm making progress. I'm not just like, yeah, maybe I'm learning the area a little bit better, but I'm making like tangible progress. Now that I've gotten this far, I can maybe have a shortcut that advances me through some stuff, or maybe I've reached another checkpoint that allows me allows me to be able to spend my resources, allows me to be able to make use of these things that I've picked up. The other thing is Ashen has a very limited inventory system, so maybe it would be nice to be able to go back and drop some stuff off at the storage box. So these are some of the things I was noticing with Ritual Stones versus Bonfires. And also just kind of the weird in-between spot. Like Ashen is kind of in an in-between spot between Dark Souls 1 and then like the Dark Souls 2 and 3 hub model. And it really made me kind of appreciate some of the stuff that the Souls games did. And it's getting me thinking. It's gotten me thinking a lot. If I do a game that's following more in some of these concepts of checkpoints and dropping your resources on death and things like that, I'm going to want to make sure I have an understanding of enabling the player to be able to spend their resources, thinking about how I'm doing checkpointing, and thinking about how I'm enabling the player to make like steps of progress rather than asking them to make like how big is the step of progress that I'm asking the player to make from their checkpoint, basically the place that they can be starting at their expedition. How am I going to set up ways of allowing them to be able to make smaller steps of progress that's not just checkpoints, that's things like shortcuts. Things like enemies that aren't respawning is another way of doing progress, because there's some enemies in the Souls games, for example, that don't respawn. Normally, when you use a checkpoint, use a bonfire, all of the enemies respawn. But there's some enemies that don't. And so, like, how am I thinking of providing the player steps of progression and not just requiring them to make, like, this huge climb in order to make large chunks of progression? They're different styles. It's absolutely true. And one of the things that I've learned from this is which style I prefer, what method I prefer, how I want things to function, all that sort of stuff. And I appreciate that. And that's something that I think is really valuable for my time playing Ashen. So I thank you all for listening. I think that's all I really wanted to say here. Feels a little bit like I didn't really end on anything major, but hopefully it's built up to something interesting. And thank you for your time. Until next time, everyone, whenever that ends up being, take care and goodbye.